debate this evening. So, Craig Murray.
Thank you. It's an enormous pleasure to be here. This is the first time I've spoken during the referendum campaign. I hope it won't be the last, but that will depend on somebody here thinking I'm any good and inviting me back to do it again, which we'll see how that goes. I'm going to give you a very unique perspective and perhaps confuse everybody by starting by talking in Tashkent. Not the language, the city. Because we heard earlier from the chairman, we've all come different routes and different ways to get here. My way to get here led through Tashkent, and the incident which started me on the path that leads me to speak to you today occurred in a Tashkent courtroom, which would be about the size of this room, where I'd gone along to witness a trial of some Al-Qaeda operatives. And an old man was giving evidence. And he had given a statement to say that one of the defendants, who was his nephew, was a member of Al-Qaeda. And in the witness box, the old man broke down in tears and said, "It's not true. They tortured my children in front of me until I signed this statement." Now, as it happened, I was very close to him. I mean, I could almost have touched him as he gave his evidence. And it just felt true. It was a moment of epiphany. You could tell that old man was telling the truth, and his children had been tortured in front of him. And that was part of the global war on terror. I was there as representative of the government that was actually cooperating with the Uzbek government. People were, the Guardian, about a week ago, published their interactive map of US extraordinary rendition flights, which has been compiled by the University of Kent. 122 of those flights came into Tashkent, where I was based. The Americans were sending people to Tashkent in order to be tortured. And I was expected to be part of that system. As it happened, I was then seeing the intelligence, so-called, from CIA and MI6 that came out of those torture chambers. And often it was just demonstrably wrong. And its purpose was to build a false picture which exaggerated the strength of Al-Qaeda in Central Asia. And the reason they wanted to do that was to justify the UK's alliance with one of the worst dictatorships in the world. Yeah. And the real reason they wanted that alliance was to get at the oil and gas resources of Central Asia. So we had a policy built on lies, built on false intelligence, involving torture, in which this government, and I'm an eyewitness, in which this government was complicit, and which was as fundamentally immoral as anything could be. And I should say that not one of the people who was flown under extraordinary rendition to Tashkent, not one of them emerged alive. I can't prove it, but I am convinced that they've all been killed and lie under the Kizilkum desert. Now then, this intelligence, I knew it was false. I could tell it was false very often. We used to get these long lists of Al-Qaeda people, and sometimes I would know them. There was one list I got which contained the name of a professor with whom I had had dinner, and he was there in this list of Al-Qaeda personnel in Uzbekistan. And I know the man, and he is a Jehovah's Witness, who the CIA were naming as Al-Qaeda. There are not many Jehovah's Witnesses in Al-Qaeda. I'm actually willing to bet that Al-Qaeda don't even try and recruit Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm quite sure that Jehovah's Witnesses would try and recruit Al-Qaeda if they could find them, but it was not remotely plausible. Now, this was all happening in 2002 and 2003, at exactly the same time that the government was publishing the dodgy dossier on weapons of mass destruction. Because there, again, it was a deliberate use of false intelligence. And as it happens, by coincidence, I had previously been the head of the Foreign Office unit that monitored Iraqi weapons systems. And I can tell you that I knew that dossier was lies, and I can tell you for certain, from certain knowledge, that the people who wrote it, including Dickie Stagg, now our ambassador in Afghanistan, and including John Scarlett, they knew it was lies too. And the head of the Defense Intelligence Service has come out and said that. And I found myself in a position where I was working for a government which was so fundamentally warped and so fundamentally immoral, and which was prepared to get into torture and a legal war to forward the economic interests of the people who pay the politicians, and I had had enough, because the United Kingdom is not an entity which anybody should be proud of anymore. Our foreign policy for the last decade has been disastrous and has brought upon us hatred from much of the rest of the world. What Blair and Bush did when they invaded Iraq without the consent of the United Nations was exactly the same thing that Hitler and Mussolini had done to the League of Nations. We are no longer the good guys, and there's no use pretending that we are. And the politicians are obsessed with these status symbols of massive power, with a need to keep Trident missiles at enormous expense, even though they are no use to anybody, with this idea that it's essential for the United Kingdom to retain a seat on the UN Security Council. Why should we? Why? Well, we are no longer a great imperial power. Why should the structures of international institutions be frozen where the world was in 1945? And why is it that the Italians and the Germans and the Belgians and all these other people managed to live perfectly well without a permanent seat on the Security Council and without nuclear weapons? And nothing actually terrifying has happened to them. Now then, apparently the notion of national independence is the most terrifying thing in the world. I'm going to give you just a little rundown of some BBC headlines, okay? Now you can look these up on the BBC website. These are all actual headlines, and I think you'll see a theme coming through. Scottish independence, pension shortfall warning. UK Treasury warning about SNP plan for currency union after independence. Scottish independence, warning over weakened military. Scottish independence, Luxembourg warns against. Scottish independence, Barroso warning on EU membership. Scottish independence, havoc warning. Scottish independence, Michael Moore issues warning. That one actually scared me so much I almost didn't come. Scottish independence, border checks warning from Home Office. And my final one, possibly my favourite, genuine BBC headline, warning for SNP over renewable energy after independence. Because obviously the wind will stop. It's bollocks, isn't it? In my diplomatic career, I used to sit and negotiate and discuss. I attended meetings at the United Nations, I attended meetings at the EU. I worked regularly alongside people representing countries like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Ireland, New Zealand. Just look, there are plenty of small independent countries in this world which are perfectly capable of running their own affairs, representing themselves internationally and contributing to the international community without feeling the need to possess large nuclear weapons and try and dominate everyone else. There is nothing wrong with us Scots. There's no reason why we can't do what the Danes can do. And interestingly, we heard from the last speaker about that latest UN list, which was the Mums League list of where is the best place to bring up a child. And the top 5 countries on that list, the 5 best places to bring up a child, were all small, independent European states. There are many such lists. I think 7 of the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world are small, independent European states. Transparency International, the 5 least corrupt countries in the world are small, independent European states. Freedom House, the 5 countries with the best human rights records in the world are small, independent European states. We can do it. The idea of a nation state is hardly new. There is no reason at all why we can't do it and make a very good success of it. And we should do it because we do have our own culture. We do have our own view. And as we've heard today from so many speakers, that view is one which values social inclusiveness and social equality and a good standard of living for absolutely everybody, rather more than those are viewed by, let's be honest, the English Conservative Party who dominate politics down there. And I live in England nowadays, and I can tell you where I live, UKIP just won the local council. And it scares me. The stuff on their leaflets and the stuff people are saying about immigrants really scares me. It's not something which I recognise as part of the political culture I grew up in. I was, until recently, rector of the University of Dundee. For me, possibly the worst development of all. There have been so many. As we've headed into more and more inequality, into a larger and larger wealth gap, into more privatisation, there have been so many things that have gone wrong. For me, the single worst thing of all in my lifetime in terms of policy in the United Kingdom has been the introduction of university tuition fees. Because we're going to reach a system very soon, and now they are, for English people, £9,000 commonly a year, just for your tuition fees. The level of debt people are having to take on is so extreme that not only do we have that growing gap between rich and poor, it's going to solidify, because the ladder for people to get on and socially progress through free education is being pulled away. And education has always been a tremendous and uniquely Scottish value. It's a country, Scotland has always absolutely treasured the idea that every man has a right to an education, every man has a right to understand, discuss this idea of an inclusive social community. And that's the way our universities used to function. But they too, our universities, are being marketised. I used to sit on meetings of Dundee University Court, and they would actually refer to students as customers, which used to infuriate me. We have got to take national independence because we need to express our own cultures and our own values, which are under danger of attack as the social systems in the United Kingdom are changing. We need to take independence, thank you. We need to take independence because we want to be part of a country where defence means defence, where our policy is to defend ourselves if we're attacked. Our policy is not to go out attacking other people. a country which plays the role a small country can in UN peacekeeping, in international negotiation, in the international community, as a fair and valued player where we can actually be proud of our country and have a genuine patriotism based on ethical behaviour, and as our good friend Robin Cook would say, ethical foreign policy. Thank you very much indeed.